What's up, YouTube? I am the Vanilla Nerd, and today I want to talk about Star Trek 2009. I just watched this movie. I had a lot of fun. Want to review it, so let's talk about it. But quick, before we begin, I do want to say spoilers for this movie from start to finish. If you haven't seen it, get out now while you can, but there will be no spoilers for its sequels or anything like that, as well as no real spoilers for modern Star Trek or any other Star Trek. I'll just be talking about very general broad strokes of the original series and stuff. Not that I think anyone really cares about spoilers for the original trilogy, or original series, but I digress. Anyway, spoilers for this movie and this movie alone. So, Star Trek 2009. This movie is even older than Jumanji, which I reviewed earlier this week, but that's okay. I'm not trying to be topical on this channel. I'm trying to review movies that interest me or movies that I've seen recently, and this one falls into both of those categories. Regardless, like Superman 2025, this movie is called Star Trek 2009, not because the year is in the title, but because it came out in 2009, and there's already a movie called Star Trek the Motion Picture, and we needed a way to differentiate between the two. By the way, Star Trek the Motion Picture is also a dumb name. I don't like either of these names. I wish they'd given them something more unique. Yeah, if it's not obvious at this point, I have a pet peeve with movies and their names. It doesn't ruin the movie for me or anything, but it does bother me a bit. When this movie came out in 2009, I do remember a number of my friends going to see it and enjoying it and thinking that they liked Star Trek now. And I kind of laughed in their faces a bit because I knew the true Star Trek, quote unquote. I grew up watching the 1980s movies and watching the various episodes from the original series, The Next Generation and Deep Space Nine. And so I was proud of my Star Trek knowledge, probably more than I should have been, but it is one of my dad's favorite shows, and it's a show that I've learned to enjoy, and it's a way I connect with him. So I do love Star Trek. But yeah, I was definitely more proud of my Star Trek knowledge than I should have been. How far nerds have come in this world. But speaking of my father and his love of Star Trek, I will always remember something he said about this movie. He really liked it, and one of the things he appreciated was that, quote, they had the respect for the fandom to make this movie an alternate timeline. You see, he recognized that this movie didn't follow the typical Star Trek formula. It was meant to be an easily digestible action-adventure movie. It didn't really bring up that many interesting, wild sci-fi ideas, nor did it raise many interesting moral questions, like previous Star Trek movies or the TV shows themselves. But those differences can be looked over when you accept that this is not the main timeline. This is not the Star Trek that came before. The movie acknowledges this and creates an alternate timeline and moves on. And this is something I have grown to appreciate myself as the movie has aged. But diving into what this movie is actually about, I really love that this is an origin story for both Spock and Kirk. While Kirk certainly gets more screen time and is more often our POV character, Spock gets plenty of great moments. I particularly enjoy when Spock declines to enroll in the Vulcan Institute of Technology and says the line, "Live long and prosper," with the most venom and loathing I have ever seen weaved into that sentiment. It's perfect. But it's really cool to see the similarities between Kirk and Spock's upbringing. They both had it hard, they both struggled to find their own way, and then seeing them butt heads and have such conflicting ideologies was so satisfying and made for a really an interesting plot and a compelling story. This movie really nails the relationship between Kirk and Spock, and that's what makes the film work. Of course, this film also serves as an origin story for the entire crew of the Starship Enterprise. A lot of the characters take their predetermined positions based on luck or happenstance, but I do appreciate that Uhura became the chief communications officer because she was simply more skilled than the current communications officer they had on hand. That was a really cool moment for her character. Now, speaking of the plot of this movie, let's talk about Nero, the angry Romulan, and his plan to destroy Vulcan and Earth. First, I really like that he succeeded. He destroyed Vulcan and absolutely crushed both Spock and old Spock. This makes him a credible threat, but also differentiates this universe significantly from the main timeline, because it's more than just Kirk's father not existing. Vulcan is completely gone, and that's a big difference from what has affectionately become known as the Kelvin timeline. For those not in the know, the ship we see at the beginning of the movie is called the USS Kelvin. It gets destroyed by Nero in the opening scene, which sets the events of this alternate universe in motion, hence the Kelvin time. But more than that, this opening scene was a really cool way to start the film. I love the action. I love how they showed the very mechanical aspects to the weapon systems of both the United Federation ship, but also the Romulan ship. It's something I haven't seen before in Star Trek films and TV shows. More often than not, they just have bright, flashy torpedoes or lasers shoot out from the ship ambiguously. You don't really get to see where it comes out. But to have these cool little cannons on the side of the Federation ship, or the missile locking system of the Romulan ship being fired, was really interesting and made the world feel so much more real and tactile. And that's something I really love about the Kelvin timeline, is how real and lived in the universe feels. Quick side note, I really love the design of the USS Kelvin. I know that it breaks Star Trek convention because Gene Roddenberry, the creator of Star Trek, set up a rule that the nacelles, aka the engines of the Star Trek ships, these things, need to come in pairs. Hence, you have ships that look a lot like this from the 90s television shows, which all feature 2 nacelles, or 4 or 6. But I don't really care. The USS Kelvin looks really cool, and it looks like it would be a natural predecessor to the Starship Enterprise. I have always loved the design of the Kelvin, and I love that its addition to the Star Trek universe. But I digress. But going back to the alternate universe/timeline discussion, what I really appreciate about this different timeline is that it wasn't just Kirk's father dying that changed. While that is important and it gives Kirk some tragedy to his story, eventually gives him a connection to Spock because Spock lost his mom. But regardless, if the only difference for this universe was that Kirk's father wasn't present, it wouldn't feel that different, I think, from the rest of Star Trek. I mean, you could say that due to the butterfly effect, the Kelvin's destruction had untold ramifications throughout the universe, but that would be kind of lame. Regardless, I just really appreciate that Vulcan was destroyed because it really sets the Kelvin timeline apart from the main timeline, and I think that works really well. Jumping back into the movie, I love the character of Kirk in this film. He is reckless, he leaps without looking, as Christopher Pike puts it, and quite literally the movie had him leap without looking, which might have been a little on the nose, but I think it was appropriate, and I think it worked for this film. But when it comes to Kirk, I really love the line when the security officer goes, "In case you haven't noticed, there's 4 of us and 1 of you." And Kirk responds with just the most arrogant and cocky thing, "So get some more guys and maybe it will be an even fight." It felt so much like the Kirk I grew up with. I just loved it. Plus, to his credit, Kirk does put up a pretty good fight against those 4 dudes before getting pummeled. Big bloody nose and everything. Also, the Kobayashi Maru scene was really fun. I don't mind that they retconned the test to be the creation of Spock. It was a natural and easy way to create animosity between Kirk and Spock. Plus, Spock does feel like the kind of guy who would create a test such as the Kobayashi Maru, so I think it works. I will add here that I do not appreciate the steamy scene they gave Kirk. I get that it furthers his character as this reckless womanizer, and even aligns with the way his character was depicted in the original series. I mean, in the original series, he ends up kissing every other hot alien woman he runs into. And I get that it also explains how he knew about the Klingons being attacked by the massive Romulan ship, because when Uhura kicks him out, she talks about it in this scene. But it still is something I don't want to see in my movies, and it's a scene I skip every time I watch this film. You might not have an issue with the scene, and that's fine, but I wanted to bring it up because this is my review, and it's something that, for me, does take away from the film a bit. Anyways, I guess the last thing I'll say about the plot is I really love the ending, how they were able to defeat Nero by getting him distracted into attempting to kill Spock. He goes so far as to leave Earth, jump into hyperspace, and chase after Spock because he hates Spock that much. And playing into his human emotions there is a really fun way to kind of bring the movie full circle. Also, I really love when Kirk offers to assist Nero, and Nero declines by saying he'd rather die 1,000 deaths. And Kirk's just like, "You got it," and starts just blowing his ship up with everything the Enterprise has. It's fantastic. But to wrap up, let's talk about the red matter and some of the plot points surrounding it. So, the red matter science majig was a little weird. Firstly, as many people have pointed out, there really is no need to drill a hole to the center of a planet in order to drop the little red matter dot into it. While it makes for a cool visual, it's ultimately unnecessary. A black hole right next to a planet would suck up the planet just as easily as a black hole inside the planet. However, Nero isn't exactly the most rational villain, so I could understand how he would put spectacle over practicality. But secondly, they make a big deal that one dot of red matter can cause this big black hole that destroys an entire planet. And yet when the entire beach ball-sized mass of red matter explodes, it doesn't make a black hole that much bigger than the ones we'd already seen. So yeah, I feel like there was definitely some consistency issues there. But thirdly, they played fast and loose with what a black hole does, because at certain points in the movie, it teleports you through time, and at other points, it just destroys a planet, and there's no hope for those people ever coming back, or that those people like went into a different timeline or anything, or returning. They're dead. And that's fine. Star Trek hasn't always had the greatest track record of being consistent in its pseudoscience, but it does hurt the movie, I feel like, a bit, for me. Another critique I have with this film is that old Spock's backstory doesn't make a ton of sense. He describes how they learned that a star exploded and the resulting supernova threatened to destroy the galaxy. Like, how? It's just one star. Even if it's a really big star, I don't think a supernova could destroy an entire galaxy. But maybe I'm wrong. I'm not a science expert or anything. Regardless, a supernova could threaten to destroy a planet, so sure, there's a supernova threatening to destroy Romulus. That's all that's important, right? The Vulcans promised the Romulans they'd fix it. They had time to build a ship, build a really fast ship, and get some red matter to go solve the problem. And then all the explanation we're given as to Spock's failure is, I was en route when the unthinkable happened. The supernova destroyed Romulus. And I'm like, wasn't that the very thing you were supposed to stop? Like, this is on par with somehow Palpatine survived from the sequel Star Wars movies, you know? I'm just like, this is what you were supposed to stop. Like, you had time to build a ship. Like, wasn't the super duper science stuff from Vulcan supposed to track the movements of the supernova and stop this before it happened? But no, it just happens. Like, there's nothing to say that it happened prematurely. There's nothing to say that it sped up because there was like a nebula that gave it more juice or anything, some pseudoscience like that. It just happened. He just failed. And it's just like, wait, what? Please explain that a little bit better than just it exploded before I got there. Sorry, that's how it happens sometimes. Like, what? But again, I will say, for a popcorn action movie, it doesn't matter. It doesn't red matter. All you need to know is Spock failed, and his failure resulted in the destruction of Romulus. And now he's brought technology and red matter from the future to Kirk's time. And we get to have a fun movie. And I'm not sad by that. I really like the movie that we're given, even if the backstory explanation doesn't hold up to the most scrutiny. But despite those issues, I still love Star Trek 2009. I thought it was an excellent way to start a new era of Star Trek. They did a really good job recasting all the characters, making Kirk, Spock, Uhura, all of them more interesting, and I just love that so much. They did a really good job honoring what came before. There were a lot of fun, tiny nods to the original series and to the rich history that these characters have. It was a fun movie. Plus, the ensemble cast was also really fun. I didn't even get to mention Bones or Scotty, but they were both hilarious in the scenes that they got to shine. I loved the new look they gave the Star Trek universe, whether it was the ships of the Enterprise or Kelvin, or even just the more tactile nature of the universe, with rotating railgun cannons and a water system inside the Starship Enterprise. Like, it really feels like a lived-in universe, but still had that Star Trek clean, pristine feeling, which I'm glad they were able to balance both of those two aesthetics. So, yeah, Star Trek 2009. Good film. Highly recommend it. What were your thoughts on the film? Do you guys remember this movie? Do you like it? Did you not? How do you think it's aged? Tell me all that good stuff in the comments below.